Hello, and welcome to the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews. I'm Ben DiBono, here to talk to you about Neal Stephenson. Yes, another Neal Stephenson review. If you're getting sick of those, I'm sorry. I'm on a Neal Stephenson kick right now since I don't get paid to do this. Anything for the site, we review what I want to read, and right now that's Neal Stephenson. So, another Neal Stephenson review, this time of The Diamond Age. His second sci-fi novel after Snow Crash. He had a handful of earlier novels, including a couple that he wrote with his uncle under a pen name that I don't remember off the top of my head right now. But Diamond Age, his second sci-fi novel after Snow Crash, and one I've been looking forward to reading for a while. You can tell it's an earlier Neal Stephenson book just by looking at it, and what I mean by that is that it's like this instead of like this. This one I think is 500 pages compared to the 1,000 pages that he's written. I think every book since has been 1,000 pages, give or take some. Anathema, Cryptonomicon, The Baroque Cycle, Ream D. So yeah, all the books he's come out with since this for fiction. He's come out with a couple shorter non-fiction collections, but all of his novels have been very, very long. That's the dog. I'll go let him out. Come on, stop it. Stop it. I really wasn't quite sure what to expect from this book. I knew I would like it because I've liked everything I've read by Neal Stephenson, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be in the good Neal Stephenson category of Snow Crash and Ream D, or if it was going to be in the great, holy crap, amazing category of Cryptonomicon and Anathema. The reason for that is a couple of things. First, it is the book he wrote right after Snow Crash. Snow Crash is a classic, but a flawed classic. You can watch my review for what I had to say about that more in depth. But it's my least favorite Neal Stephenson novel out of the ones I've read. I just don't think, for all of the amazing things that novel does, there's a lot of problems in it. Structurally, with the ending, with some of the characters. Still a good book, really good book, but a flawed book. So I wasn't quite sure where this was going to land. I know I've read some reviews from people who said it's confusing, it's kind of hard to follow, so I wasn't quite sure what we were going to get. It turns out that this is very much an in-between book, and I mean that in a couple different ways. I would place it closer to the great Neal Stephenson books, but it's not quite there. It's not as good as Cryptonomicon, it's not as good as Anathema, but it's also better than Snow Crash and better than Ream D. So it's an in-between book that way, but more interestingly, it's an in-between book in terms of Neal Stephenson's themes. What I mean by that is that you can see a huge transition going on in this book between the larger-than-life, chaotic, hyperactive atmosphere of Snow Crash and the more grounded, detailed, technical, not that Snow Crash wasn't technical, but, comparatively speaking, world of Cryptonomicon in the later books. Okay? This really occupies a middle ground between the two. And that's fascinating to me. It shows his development as a thinker, as a writer. Let me give you an example. So a lot of the world here has a lot in common with Snow Crash. In fact, I was reading that there are some theories that this is actually in the same world as Snow Crash, just set later on. I'm not going to go into detail on those because I don't read them closely enough, but you can do a little research for yourself and figure out what I'm talking about. So, setting-wise, this has a lot in common with Snow Crash, kind of a toned-down version of Snow Crash. This world, we don't have, mind viruses, we don't have Pete's Delivery, Run by the Mafia, anything like that. But the whole sense of claves, the whole kind of libertarian dystopian society, this type thing is still going on. And then on the other hand, we are moving heavily towards Cryptonomicon's world. Turing Machines play an unexpectedly large role in the second half of this novel. I won't go into why. But the sense of hacking, the sense of coding, the sense of programming really comes to the forefront in this novel. And so we have this transition point thematically, and I find that really fascinating. In fact, thematically, this book is an absolute winner. There are so many things you could talk about with this book. It functions as a study of class. We have our more of the I'm trying to think of what its name, but the Asian claves, and then the Neo-Victorian claves, and kind of the tension that exists between all of these people who are living together in the same geographical space, but in very, very different worlds. The way that technology plays itself out in terms of class struggles, in terms of individual achievement. Is technology the great leveler in terms of helping somebody born into an impoverished situation be able to rise above that situation and be on the same level as somebody born with more fortunate opportunities? Those are the questions he explores. We get into the sense of, what does technology look like for entertainment purposes? Is entertainment the same as it's always been, or is it completely different in a world run by nanotechnology and VR and all this stuff? And the answer is yes. It's completely the same and it's completely different, and it's fascinating the way he draws that out. There's literary criticism going on in this book about the nature of stories, the way that stories teach us, the purpose of stories in teaching us to think, teaching us to explore our worlds. Something that I harp on a lot on the podcast, that stories aren't just there to entertain you, they're there to teach you, they're there to show you truth in a unique way. And we get a lot of that in this book, and it's so good. And the way that stories drive us then to pass that on to others. I'm being vague on some of the specifics because I want you to be able to discover it for yourself in this book. We even there's a brief section, well, not really a brief section, but one of the more minor themes, but definitely there, is the nature of online relationships or technological relationships. I guess I'm not sure how much we would say they're online in this world, but our equivalent, which this is written in the mid-90s. So long before internet dating became a thing and all that. And the questions we wrestle with today is an online relationship a real relationship? Can you say you really know those people? And some people say yes, and some people say no, and somebody like me says it depends, and it's complicated. And are online relationships different than normal face-to-face relationships? Absolutely, but are they not relationships? No. And Neal Stephenson explores that idea a lot in the characters of Miranda and Nell and their relationship to one another. Perfect example of how this plays itself out. In terms of Neal Stephenson being so prophetic with how prominent that type of relationship is going to become. Two ways I can share from my personal life. Number one, and the more significant of the two, is I met my wife on a dating site. I met her online. And eventually we have met face-to-face now, lest anyone be concerned, but that started as a virtual relationship, and it quickly moved into a face-to-face relationship, but it started as a virtual relationship. And maybe an even better example, not because it's more significant in my life, it's not, but a relationship I've had that has grown into a very strong friendship, even though I've never met the guy, is Dave, who I did the Rindy review with. I mean, that was like the closest he and I have ever come to talking face to face, was when we did that review. But we've been friends for years, and 99% of that relationship has all been online. And doing the podcast with Matt, I mean, we've met a ton of people who I would consider, and many of them who I would consider friends now. I mean, some of them are just fans or whatever, but we've talked enough with certain people where I do consider them friends. So a couple of them very close friends now we've met through the podcast, all online. All online. And so Neal Stephenson in the mid-90s sees this as a possibility, and well, it's not a major theme in the novel, he touches on that, and I love it because it's so prophetic. Another area where he's really prophetic is, these 3D printers we're getting now. He has a more advanced version than that in his book. It's called he calls them matter compilers. And it's basically just a really, really, really high-tech 3D printer. But, I mean, it can do things like create weapons, and they're high-tech weapons. But even now, in our low-tech, very early on 3D printers, I mean, you can make a gun with a 3D printer. And what does that mean for society? And these are questions we're having to wrestle with now in 2013. What does it mean that I can go out to the store and buy a 3D printer and then print a gun, and I have, no registration, no license for it whatsoever? And is that a good thing? If you're Second Amendment rights advocates, maybe you say yes. If you're somebody who is somewhere in the gun control spectrum, from moderate gun control to confiscate, you're going to say no. But that's the world we live in now. And so wherever you come down on that, you have to wrestle with it. And Neal Stephenson draws those themes out. So this is a very prophetic book. And it's fascinating. It's a book that I feel compelled to read again, because I know that there's a lot here I missed. Even the themes I'm rattling off now, there's a ton more, stuff like, I mentioned kind of the individual class, but also what's the role of technology in terms of providing opportunity for social revolution and or social isolation. Does technology get to the point where we can, the world, on the one hand we're so interconnected, but on the other that we can find so many like-minded people that we can use technology to close ourselves off from others who are different from us? And how is that different than what the world has always been, where people have only existed? If you think of let me see if I can explain this a little better. Pre-20th century world, where the world's very small or whatever, and you grow up and most people are living most of their lives in the same general area, only exposed to the ideas and norms of their culture and everything, and that's just how the world was. It's not good, it's not bad, that's just how it was. And are we recreating that with technology now? In being able to just find like-minded people and technologically isolate ourselves off, not by geography, not by race or nationality or necessarily religion, it could be, or any of those things that used to define those class boundaries, but, interest, passion, politics, I guess religion does play in here. And so we have new ways of isolating ourselves. And what does that mean in a technological sense? And that gets explored in this novel. So very rich thematically. And I think that brings us to maybe the one weakness of this novel, that again, like Neal Stephenson's shorter stuff, it needs to be longer. And you especially notice this in the back half of the book, where it seems like there's so much going on, both plot-wise and thematically, that it doesn't quite things don't quite get the time they deserve. This needed to be an 1,000-page Neal Stephenson tome, and thankfully after this one he did go on to write those. Look, I love short books. There are a lot of books that work great as 200 pages or less. Neal Stephenson stuff isn't among them. He is somebody who needs that space. Now, at times, can he be, too wordy or whatever? Yeah, Dave and I mentioned some of that in Read D. So maybe this didn't need to be 1,000 pages. Maybe it needed to be 600 instead of 500 or 700. I'm not saying it needed to be double the size, but it needed more. It needed more, and that especially got noticed I especially noticed that in the back half of the novel, really the back third of the novel. But that's a fairly minor complaint given all that is good in this work. It's another home run from Neal Stephenson. I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Please read this book. There's so much entertainment out there that is just mindless, and you don't need more of that. Okay, I get that we all need to check our brains at the door sometimes, but there's plenty of options to do that. Take the time to read something that's going to challenge you, it's going to make you think. Neal Stephenson's novels are going to do that. The Diamond Age is a great place to start. I highly, highly recommend you take a look. So that's all for now. 4.5 stars for The Diamond Age. I'm Ben DeBono, and this is the Sci-Fi Christian Book Reviews.